There is a particular density in the air during the last few days, a heaviness that corresponds neither to the weather nor to external circumstances, but to an emotional atmosphere that has settled into your reality. It is very likely that you have felt a sudden restlessness, a kind of inner alarm that goes off without any apparent reason in the midst of daily routine. The logical mind, the one that always searches for tangible explanations and concrete evidence, tries to dismiss this feeling by saying that everything remains the same, that nothing has visibly changed, and that there is no reason for concern. Yet deep inside, in that place where the deepest intuition resides, one knows with certainty that something fundamental has shifted in the invisible structure of this connection. It is not the product of imagination or fear. It is the innate ability to perceive the vibrations of someone who shares a deep bond with you. When two souls are intertwined by destiny, physical silence does not cancel energetic communication, and what is being perceived now is the echo of a decision made at a distance. This message does not arrive in your life by chance, but through resonance. The universe does not miscalculate and does not send signals to someone who is not ready to decipher them. If these words resonate within you right now, it is because there is a precise alignment between your inner state and the truth that is about to reveal itself. There are cycles that must be closed so that others may open. And this restlessness that does not let you be, this sudden awakening in the early morning hours, or this feeling of emptiness in your chest, are confirmations that the status quo has been broken. Someone on the other end of this invisible thread has reached a turning point. It is not a momentary whim or a superficial mood shift. It is an inner breakdown that has slowly developed, drop by drop, until the glass finally overflowed. It is important to understand that what is happening is not a personal attack or a conscious act of lovelessness, even if the loneliness it causes may feel that way. What has happened is that this person has reached the limit of their human and spiritual resilience. We are often taught to value endurance, to stay, to fight, but rarely are we told about the cost of maintaining a situation that no longer resonates with the truth of one's being. This person has carried an invisible weight, an accumulation of unspoken words, unfulfilled expectations, and above all, a growing separation from their own essence. The fatigue referred to here is not the kind cured by a weekend of sleep or a vacation. It is a fatigue of the soul, an existential exhaustion that arises when someone has tried to force a reality that no longer fits, or has given more energy than they had available. For a long time, everything may have seemed normal on the surface. Interactions continued, routines were maintained, and the smiles, perhaps a bit dimmer, still appeared. But beneath this layer of normality, a silent battle was taking place, a battle between the desire to maintain the connection and the urgent need to survive emotionally. The decision to take distance, to become silent or to withdraw was not made yesterday or today. It was a conclusion reached after many sleepless nights, after many internal debates between heart and mind. It was a silent decision made in the solitude of one's own consciousness to protect the little that remained of energetic integrity. The intuition you feel is the alarm system detecting this retreat. Even though there has been no final conversation or detailed explanation, energy does not lie. One feels the absence before the physical departure becomes concrete. Completely. One senses the change in the gaze, the coldness in the words, or the delay in responses. It is not indifference, it is self-preservation. This person has withdrawn inward because the outer world and the demands of this connection in its current form have become unsustainable. It is essential to validate what you feel. You are not imagining anything. This fear is confirmation that the connection is real, so real that your emotional system registers the movements of the other as if they were your own. In its infinite wisdom, the universe allows these pauses to occur, not to punish, but to reorder. Sometimes love alone is not enough when the structure on which it rests is unbalanced. This person did not step away because love has disappeared, but because the dynamic, as it was built, drained their life reserves. It is like trying to run a marathon with an open wound. A moment comes when the body stops, not because it does not want to reach the finish line, but because it needs to heal in order to continue. The decision made is essentially a cry for help from the soul, asking for space to breathe, to rediscover itself, and to evaluate whether it is possible to continue without losing oneself in the process. Uncertainty is painful, and silence can be the most deafening sound there is. But there is a hidden truth in this scenario that must be revealed in order to find some peace. It is not about a definitive end carved in stone, but about an inevitable, energetic consequence. Life demands transformation. Intuition has brought you here to confirm that yes, something has changed, something has broken, but not to leave you in despair, rather to give you a higher perspective on the facts. This person could not continue, and their withdrawal is the symptom of something much deeper than simple disinterest. It is the result of exhausting performance, of maintaining a persona that could no longer breathe. But to understand why this distance became inevitable and necessary right now, one must look into a place where the light of consciousness rarely reaches, the depths of the psyche and the masks we wear to be loved. If you are ready to integrate this lesson into your life, write in the comments, "I trust the transformation." To understand the magnitude of what is happening, we must turn to one of the most revealing concepts in depth psychology, an idea that Carl Jung explored extensively, and one that explains this person's behavior with surgical precision. At this moment, all human beings without exception construct an interface to interact with the world, a kind of social mask designed to make a good impression, to be accepted, to meet the expectations of others, and to protect themselves from rejection. This structure is called the persona, a term derived from the masks that actors in ancient times wore to amplify their voices and define their role in the play. This particular person your heart is asking about has worn a very heavy mask for far too long, and the weight of this performance has finally caused a breakdown. Imagine for a moment the titanic effort required to maintain an image of strength while feeling fragility inside. Imagine the wear of appearing always available, always kind, or perhaps always indifferent and in control, when in reality there are unprocessed emotions within. This person constructed a persona, a mask, to relate to you and to the world. Perhaps it was the mask of someone who can do everything, or someone who needs no one, or someone who always pleases others. At first, the mask worked. It was useful. It allowed the relationship to flow and made one feel a false sense of security. But masks are rigid. They do not grow. They do not breathe. And over time, they begin to suffocate the one who wears them. The exhaustion we speak of, this "I can't take it anymore," is the direct result of the friction between who this person truly is and who they pretended to be. It is not about a malicious lie or a calculated deception. Most of the time, the mask is unconsciously adopted as a defense mechanism learned in childhood or in past relationships. One learns that they must behave in a certain way to receive love, that they must hide certain dark or vulnerable parts, and they begin to play a role. But in a connection of deep bond like this, the truth always fights to come out. The energy required to keep the mask in place is immense, and a day comes when the reserves are exhausted. What you recently witnessed, this abrupt change, this coldness, or this flight, is the exact moment in which the mask tore. The person no longer has the life force to maintain the figure. They can no longer pretend that everything is fine, or that they do not care, or that they can handle everything. The psychic system has said, enough. The decision to step away is in fact a desperate attempt to breathe again. By withdrawing from your presence, this person is not fleeing from you as a human being. They are fleeing from the mirror you represent. Your love and your presence invite genuine intimacy, and true intimacy requires the removal of the mask. If this person feels they are not worthy of love without their mask or is afraid to show their true vulnerability, the only option their frightened mind finds is to run. It is essential to understand that this process is an identity crisis. This person has merged so deeply with their mask that they have forgotten who they are beneath it. When they feel the persona crumbling, they experience deep panic, a sense of disintegration. This is why the decision seems so radical and sometimes so cruel. There is no room for gentle explanations. When one feels that their inner structure is collapsing, survival of the ego becomes the priority. They retreat into silence in an attempt to piece the mask back together, or, at best, to discover who they are without it. This exhaustion also explains why there may have been promises that were not kept or intentions that never materialized. It was not a lack of desire, it was a lack of energetic capacity. The mask promised things the true self was not prepared to fulfill. The mask said, "I will always be there." But the inner self was exhausted and needed solitude. The mask said, "I will give you everything you need." But the inner self was empty and needed to be filled first. When the persona collapses, all these promises hang in the air and create confusion and pain for the one who waits. But this breakdown now is better than continuing a farce that, in the long run, would have been much more damaging. A relationship based on the interaction of two masks can never achieve spiritual fullness. It is necessary for the masks to fall so that the souls can touch, and therefore, the decision to leave or create distance is a defense mechanism against the unbearable pressure of being someone one is not. It is an act of brutal honesty, though painful. This person is saying with their absence that they can no longer play the script that was written. They must step off the stage, turn off the lights, and remain in the dark to see whether there is anything real left within them. It is a moment of extreme vulnerability disguised as coldness. We often interpret silence as arrogance or indifference, when in reality, from a Jungian perspective, it may be the refuge of a psyche that feels exposed and fragile. The pain you feel is real, and the feeling of rejection is sharp. But if you can look beyond the superficial behavior, you will see a human being who fears their own inadequacy, someone who would rather leave than disappoint, or someone who desperately needs to find themselves before they can offer anything authentic to another. The mask has fallen to the ground and shattered. Trying to glue it back together will not help. What has died is the false form in which you related to each other, not necessarily the possibility of love. But this inner collapse does not occur in a vacuum, nor is it an isolated event. There is a hidden reason and a root cause why this withdrawal affects you so deeply and why this person has fled specifically from your energy, and it has to do with an invisible contract you unknowingly signed, and with the fear of a light that was paradoxically too bright to hold. When the social mask falls, an even more complex and fascinating dynamic at the center of this connection is revealed. To understand why this person fled from this particular bond and not from others, more superficial ones, we must explore what is known in depth psychology as projection. We often believe that we fall in love with someone because of their external qualities, but the truth is much more mysterious. On the deepest levels of the psyche, we are magnetically drawn to those who carry fragments of our own soul that we have forgotten or suppressed. This person saw in you something that belongs to them, but which they do not dare claim as their own. They saw in your essence a freedom, a capacity to love, or a radiance that their own shadow kept hidden. You became a living mirror of their unlived potential. And although this creates an irresistible attraction, it also awakens an uncontrollable fear. Here a fundamental concept for your soul's peace comes into play: sacred fear. Normally, when someone withdraws, the human mind tends to interpret it as disinterest or lack of affection. The inner narrative is usually destructive and suggests that if this person left, it must be because they did not find enough value in what was offered. However, the energetic reality is diametrically opposed. There is a kind of fear that does not arise from danger or negativity, but from the sublime. It is the dizziness one feels at the edge of a beautiful yet immense cliff. This person did not distance themselves due to a lack of love, but due to an excess of reality. The connection that formed between the two of you created such a high emotional tension that their nervous system, perhaps accustomed to lukewarm or transactional relationships, could not process it. Imagine someone who has lived for a long time in a dim room. When suddenly exposed to bright sunlight, their instinctive reaction will not be immediate gratitude, but pain in the eyes and an urgent need to return to the darkness to protect themselves. You were that sun. Your presence, your devotion, and the truth you radiate acted like a revealing light that illuminated not only the beauty, but also the cracks, the insecurities, and the unhealed wounds of this person. Being with you did not only mean seeing you, it meant seeing themselves with frightening clarity. They saw everything that still needed to be worked through. They saw their own vulnerability exposed and felt that the defenses they had built over years were melting in your warmth. For the ego, which seeks control and safety, this is a death threat. Therefore, the escape was not an act of rejecting your essence, but a defense mechanism against the saturation of light. A point of intensity was reached where the only way to regain inner balance and the full sense of control was to create physical distance. It is what we might call an energetic indigestion. More love and more truth were received than this person's emotional container could hold at that moment. In withdrawing, they are not necessarily seeking to end love, but to return to a comfort zone where life is predictable, manageable, and where they do not feel the implicit demand to evolve in giant steps. Because a connection of this nature always pushes toward evolution, and not everyone is ready to let their old self die in order to be reborn, at least not without first fighting a battle of resistance. This phenomenon explains the paradox of why this person can easily maintain superficial relationships with others, but flees from the deep connection with you. With others, there is no mirror. With others, they can keep their mask intact and continue functioning on autopilot. But with you, the mask falls and the truth emerges. Fleeing from you is ultimately a failed attempt to flee from their own consciousness. It is the attempt to silence the inner voice that awakened with your arrival. The temporary tragedy of this situation is that this person believes that by eliminating your physical presence, they will also eliminate the discomfort of growth. But they will soon discover that once consciousness expands, it cannot return to its original size. It is essential to reframe the interpretation of the pain you feel. It is not that you were not enough. It is that you were too much. You were too real for someone living in the fiction of their fears. You were too courageous for someone who has not yet learned to hold the gaze of their own soul. Understanding this does not eliminate the sadness of the absence, but it removes the guilt and the feeling of unworthiness. There is nothing defective about your energy. You simply vibrated at a frequency that forced the other person to confront their own limits. And in the face of this confrontation, the primary instinct was avoidance. Sacred fear paralyzes because it confronts us with the possibility of true happiness. And for many people, true happiness is terrifying because it implies loss of control and absolute surrender. This person felt that being in this connection dissolved the boundaries of their identity. They felt themselves merging into something greater, and the ego fought to reclaim its territory. The decision to leave was a Pyrrhic victory of fear over love, a battle won by momentary insecurity. But true love is persistent and not easily defeated by the barriers of fear. Although this person's physical body has moved away, the energetic imprint you left in their system is indelible. You acted as a catalyst, a substance that accelerates a chemical reaction that is now irreversible. When seen from this perspective, one can feel compassion instead of resentment. One cannot see this person as an executioner who enjoys causing pain, but as a human being overwhelmed by the magnitude of a sacred encounter, someone who is in the middle of a spiritual storm and sought refuge in the cave of isolation. The projection this person placed upon you, perhaps seeing you as unattainable or too demanding, is nothing more than the reflection of their own internal demands and their feeling of not being worthy of the gift life placed at their feet. Here, however, an unexpected twist in the story emerges. The universe has precise laws, and energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. By attempting to cut the connection on the physical plane through distance and silence, this person has unintentionally caused the connection to seek other ways to manifest. When the door of verbal communication closes and the pathways of daily interaction are blocked, the energy of the connection, still alive and pulsating, is forced to sublimate and find alternative routes. And here, the story ceases to be merely psychological and enters the realm of the mystical. When the physical body flees in fear, the soul begins to scream to compensate for the silence. It is at this exact moment, after the breakdown of visible communication, that the strangest, most unsettling, and most powerful phenomenon of this separation begins. Something that defies logic, and something you have most likely already begun to experience firsthand. With the collapse of the idealized image and the physical flight, a confusing phenomenon arises that defies all materialistic logic. Verbal communication stops, the text messages cease, and silence settles into everyday reality. But paradoxically, a much more disturbing, invasive, and deeper communication activates itself. It is important to understand that physical distance is only an optical illusion that affects the bodies, but has no authority over energy. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a kind of invisible network that connects all humanity beneath the surface of consciousness, similar to the way the roots of trees interlace beneath the earth, even though their trunks appear separate above ground. In connections of this magnitude, this underground network is not a simple thread. It is a high-voltage cable through which information constantly flows, and when the ego is silent in the visible world, the soul begins to scream in the invisible one. Here we enter the terrain of what we could call somatic telepathy. It is very likely that after the separation or distancing, you began to experience physical and emotional symptoms that do not belong to you. It is not suggestion, it is resonance. When this person suppresses the memory of you during the day in order to function and maintain their mask, that suppressed energy does not disappear, it shifts. Psychic energy behaves like water. When one route is blocked, it seeks another exit with greater pressure. By blocking you from their conscious mind, this person, without realizing it, sends all of this emotional charge directly into your energy system through the invisible connection that unites you. You become the receiver of everything this person does not dare to consciously feel. This explains why, suddenly, a deep and devastating sadness may overwhelm you in a moment of calm, or an anxiety comes without warning that has no relation to what you are doing at that moment. It is not your sadness, it is theirs. You are feeling the grief the other party denies. You are processing the emotions the other blocks. It is an involuntary emotional transfusion. The invisible cord works like a communicating vessel. When one of the two containers tries to empty itself artificially, the other fills up to restore the system's balance. Therefore, the more this person tries to forget you or distract themselves, the more intensely you feel their energetic presence entering your space. The symptoms of this somatic telepathy are very specific, and you will surely recognize several of them. One of the most common is the interruption of sleep, specifically between 3 and 4 a.m. In many spiritual and mystical traditions, it is known that during these hours the veil between the conscious and the unconscious is thinner. If you suddenly wake up without sleep and with a sense of alertness or anxiety in your chest, it is very likely that it is the exact moment when this person's psychic defenses drop because they are asleep. When they fall asleep, their ego rests, resistance disappears, and their soul runs to find yours. This sudden awakening is the impact of their energy reaching you when there are no rational barriers to stop it. It is not ordinary insomnia, it is an energetic visitation. Another common symptom is the feeling of pressure in the chest, as if air is missing or as if a physical weight rests on the heart. Sometimes it manifests as accelerated palpitations without having made any physical effort. This energy center, the heart, is the anchor point of the connection. When this person thinks of you intensely or feels a sharp regret they do not express verbally, your heart center responds. It is as if someone is pulling the invisible thread from the other end. It is also possible that you have perceived familiar scents, their perfume or a characteristic aroma associated with them in places where it is physically impossible for them to be. The sense of smell is directly linked to the limbic system, the emotional brain, and these olfactory hallucinations are actually the way your intuition translates the proximity of their vibration. This connection also manifests overwhelmingly in the dream world. Dreams stop being simple processing of daily information and become real encounters on the astral plane. You may have had dreams that feel more vivid than reality itself. Dreams in which communication is fluid, where there is no resentment, where this person speaks to you with a sincerity they cannot express in the waking state. In these dreams, they tell you what they suppress when awake. They embrace you or look at you with the love they try to hide. Jung suggested that dreams are the door to the truth of the soul. If you are constantly dreaming of this person, it is not only because you miss them, but because there is an agreed-upon meeting on that level. There, free of masks and fear, the souls continue the relationship that the egos paused on earth. Awakening from these dreams usually leaves a bittersweet feeling, a mix of peace from the reunion and pain from returning to the physical reality of silence. And you may even feel sudden temperature changes, shivers running down your spine, or a sudden heat in your hands or face. These are manifestations of the energy moving through the cord. Sometimes you may be thinking of something else entirely, and out of nowhere their name invades your mind with the force of a scream, or you hear a song meaningful to both of you at the most unlikely moment. All of this is confirmation that abandonment is only a fiction of the material plane. On the level of energy, you have never been more connected than now. The paradox is cruel but real. Physical distance has intensified spiritual closeness. Since the energy of the connection cannot be consumed in daily contact, trivial words, or routine, all of this force accumulates and travels through the invisible channel, creating this almost supernatural phenomenology. It is essential to learn how to distinguish what is yours and what belongs to the other in order not to lose your sanity during this process. When you feel an overwhelming emotion that does not match your immediate context, pause and ask yourself inwardly, is this mine or is it a visitation? Most of the time, you will discover that it is a foreign burden you carry out of unconscious loyalty to the connection. Understanding this gives your power back. You stop being a victim of your mood swings and become an observer of the connection. You know that this person has not forgotten you, that their silence is a pious lie they tell themselves. Because if they had truly forgotten you, you would not feel this energetic turmoil in your body. True indifference feels like emptiness, like peace, like nothing. What you feel is turbulence, and turbulence is a sign of life, of conflict, and of latent presence. These signals are intense, sometimes exhausting, but they are the undeniable proof that the soul contract is still active. The universe does not waste energy keeping channels open that no longer serve a purpose. If the channel is open and transmitting with such force, it is because the story is not over. It has only changed stages. It has moved from the visible stage, where the actors have withdrawn, to the invisible stage, where the play continues with greater, dramatic intensity. But these signals can be confusing and provoke fear if they are not validated. Before we dive deeper into the destiny of this connection and the higher purpose of this pain, it is important to pause and observe the raw reality of what is being felt, to confirm that you are not on a lonely journey of imagination, but in a shared experience of resonance. It is natural that, when hearing all of this, a reasonable doubt arises in the mind. It is easy to think that maybe everything is the product of desire, that the mind invents signs to comfort itself in the face of absence. That is why this is the moment to pause and look around, to use this space not only as a place of listening but as a collective mirror. When you begin to realize that this phenomenon does not exist only within you, but is reflected in countless other hearts, the pain loses its isolating power. You understand that you are part of a larger process, a movement of the soul that people all over the world experience when a connection of such depth enters the phase of transformation. This knowledge does not bring immediate relief, but it brings clarity, and clarity is the first form of peace. For once the truth is spoken or recognized, the energy begins to reorganize. What seems today like a labyrinth of doubts becomes tomorrow a traced path. And although you cannot yet see the exit, every breath, every thought, and every conscious decision moves you closer to a point where everything will make sense. Until then, only one thing remains: to trust the process that is greater than both of you and that leads you, visible or invisible, step by step to where you are meant to be.